It shows that it is 100% effective to prevent clinical disease, and the antibody concentrations are higher than the young adults within the same vaccine study. And the safety profiles are similar or even better than the younger adults. For the Moderna study, the mRNA vaccines which we have under the emergency use authorization, they have been terrific in terms of their safety profile and in terms of their efficacy so far.
Some people have been asking about is pregnant women and whether or not, pregnant women should get this vaccine.
But it is all about risk and benefit, in a pandemic where you're pregnant and when you have the risk to get COVID-19 as a pregnant woman. I personally would be very comfortable to get the vaccine. And so far, there are thousands and thousands of pregnant women who received the vaccine under EUA, and there's no safety signal that should be concerning so far. The vaccine is the same vaccine that has been used in older kids and the adults, but the dosing is different. So there are 3 different doses, and there are 3 different age groups within that 6 to 12 years of age. And the overall design is age de-escalation and dose escalation, meaning you start with the older kids with a lower dose, and when you see that that lower dose is safe in the older kids, you go up in the dose in the older kids, and you go to younger age group with a lower dose. And there are many safety checkpoints, so it is our pace will be a little bit slower than the adult studies, because we want to make sure that the safety has been reviewed.
For me, I'm very comfortable with the vaccine. My kids are 6 and 10, and when they are, when those vaccines go under EUA for kids that age in the fall, I anticipate vaccinating them. And I think that the concerns sort of arise in a few places. I'm kind of interested in what you're hearing about this, but I think what I hear is, one, well, kids are low risk, and I think it's true that the risk-benefit calculation for my 10-year-old is different than it was for me, certainly different than it was for my immune-compromised mom. But we're gonna need to help people work through that, and I think we're gonna get to a place where reasonable people are going to have differing views on this. I think for some of us who are so into the science, there's a feeling of I don't think you understand how amazingly cool this is. These mRNA vaccines are extraordinary.
Even with the mRNA platform, it is not a brand new platform. We have been working on it. We had human data starting as early as 1990s. But again, this is the year many of us heard about it for the first time, and it looks like we could have communicated better. Another question for you. Do you think, as a parent, do you think that your kids should be vaccinated to go back to school in person?
No. So I mean, okay. I spent my kids will be vaccinated, and I think that it will be helpful for some pieces of school reopenings that we will have vaccines, particularly for high school kids. Mm-hmm. But I actually worry a bit about any rhetoric around the idea that kids would need to be vaccinated for safe in-person schooling. We have had in many places in America, we have had safe in-person schooling all year, including in the fall when there was no vaccination of anybody. And certainly sort of moving into the spring, we've seen more and more and more school reopenings with vaccinated teachers.
We know that if kids get vaccinated, this is really going to allow them to go on summer vacations, to attend summer camps, to basically go to other types of gatherings and sporting events where parents don't have to worry quite as much about, is my kid going to get exposed to COVID, and will they come down with a more serious illness when they get exposed? I think, what drives a lot of people not thinking that COVID can be serious in kids is the message that's always been out there that, most kids don't get very sick from COVID. And in general, that's true. However, we do know that kids get COVID. Some of these kids can become very seriously ill with COVID. And, some of these kids have long-lasting consequences after getting COVID infection. So I think the best way to protect children from getting COVID disease is to vaccinate them. We do know that in general, COVID disease is less severe in younger children. So they are more likely to either have no symptoms or very, very mild symptoms. The only caveat to that is that we do know that younger children can still transmit the disease to others. So, they potentially could transmit the disease to other individuals in the community who are unvaccinated, who may be at a higher risk for coming down with severe disease and its complications, or someone else in the family who was not vaccinated, who might have an underlying disease that could develop severe COVID.
I would say that we have to look at the totality of the picture of what's going on here. First of all, the vaccine has been given to hundreds, actually millions of adults, and shown to be quite safe. We don't have a long-term picture yet over years, but what we know about vaccines in general is that most of the side effects that occur within the first few months, and it's very, very unusual to have sort of long-term damage to children years after vaccines been given. So that's one thing to put in mind. Yes, it is a disease that's clearly less impactful in kids in terms of severity and admissions, but we have to think about the totality. And we've also had about 300 deaths from COVID in children, which, if you think about the average flu season, we don't get 300 deaths in kids. For children and adults who get COVID, there's some evidence now that anywhere from 10 to 30% of them have what we call long haul syndrome. So this is a situation where after a month after, the children and the adults are still having persistent symptoms. It could be significant fatigue. It could be something called brain fog, where they're just not thinking clearly. There's a very strong argument to be made. And I think both you and Dr. Oster have sort of highlighted that in the previous conversation as well, as to why it's important for parents to consider this vaccine.